Good morning and welcome to the Peorian. I'm your host, Paul Gordon. Remember when we were kids and the most reverent building in town other than church was the public library? You walked in and right away you saw the big counter-like desk made of a heavy wood and the respectable women who ran the place peering down their noses as they sized you up. And you could hear this low murmur of activity, punched on occasion by one of those women telling somebody to shh. If you weren't right with the Dewey Decimal System, you had big trouble. And you felt you almost needed divine permission to approach the reference materials. Things have certainly changed since then. It was inevitable, of course, with the onslaught of technology that has wreaked havoc on so many other institutions, like the newspaper industry. But libraries all over, including right here in the Peoria region, saw it coming, perhaps a little sooner than other industries. They seem to be taking an attitude similar to, if you can't beat them, join them. They're taking steps to make technology a major part of the library's culture, rather than fighting it, and trying to cling to the old ways of doing things. My guest today is Ed Sznaka, Director of the Public Library for Peoria. And we're going to talk about those steps and the future of libraries after these messages. Welcome back to the Peorian. With me today is Ed Sznaka, Director of the Peoria Public Library. Welcome to the show, Ed.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
The library, Peoria Public Library, is nearing completion of a multi-million-dollar modernization project.
That's correct.
Tell us the impetus for that project, if you would, and kind of walk us through the phases.
Sure. Well, first of all, it's a modernization of existing buildings,
yes.
But also the addition of a whole new building in the north side. The impetus comes really after 25 years worth of petitioning from the north part of the community for a North Branch library.
Okay.
And that was one of the major issues. Over the years, the library board has tried to find locations and methods and so on, and never quite was able to bring it all together. At the same time, the other facilities were aging, falling way, way behind in their abilities to deliver contemporary services. And so this library board, the present configuration of the library board, had tremendous courage and wisdom. And I don't say that because I work for them. They really, truly did. In working together and putting together a plan. And it was a whole library plan. It wasn't one community against another. And one of the key ingredients, and in fact the name of the measure, the bond measure that went on the ballot, the slogan we used was closing the gap, because we had libraries like the Lincoln Branch Library, which was built in 1911, and had one small modification done in 1973, and that was it.
Wow.
Had 2 computers in it. At the same time, Lakeview Branch Library was doing more business than any place else in the community. All of this reflective of the changes in Peoria, growing north all the time. It was just logic was driving this. So the concept of closing the gap was an all-inclusive term to say that we want all of the locations to offer the same quality level of service.
Okay.
And so that package was all put together into a bond measure. It was originally on the ballot at $35 million. It passed with 72% yes vote. And when we got through the city council review process, it was changed a little bit. But ultimately, every one of our buildings is now shortly, by this April, Lakeview will be finished. We will have really upgraded every one of our facilities and built a brand new facility in the north.
How long had it been, if you know, since a brand new branch was added?
Well, I do know that. It was 1972, and it was the Lakeview Branch Library, which, if you think about it, was the north side of the city at that time. So it was no different in terms of the logic of doing what they did. One of the other things I should mention we merged, particularly in the south side, we had 2 what I would call reading rooms, one at River West housing area, and a little one that was in one of the old Harrison Homes buildings right next to Harrison School.
Okay.
But they were they weren't open in the evenings, they weren't open on weekends. They were reading rooms. And one of the things we did was to merge them all into the new Lincoln Branch Library because of its size. And so that was another part of the plan.
Was there ever any consideration, partly because of the population shift, to closing any of the older existing branches while building the new one?
Well, over the years, the library has changed a great deal. There was an East Bluff branch at one time at the corner of University and Main Street, where the Abantes is. That used to be a library at one time.
I did not know that.
So over time, it has changed. Okay. The interesting thing in terms of, I've been a library director for almost 40 years now, and even in that period of time I've seen this happen. The cost of doing the business that we do has changed dramatically. Books used to be the single most expensive item. Of course, that's not today. It's the staffing issues and the associated things that go with staffing. So the number of facilities you have and the staffing that goes with them ends up being a major decision-making point in visioning for the future. One of the biggest promises that we made and that we have kept, and I'm very proud to say that we kept it, was we promised that we would staff the whole new North Branch Library, almost a 30,000 square foot building, without adding one additional new staff member. And we did that. We've done it now for 3 years. And your next question should be, how did you do that?
Well, who suffered because of it?
No, that did not happen. The major thing that we did was to introduce a very large chunk of automation capabilities. And the biggest one that was very labor intensive was the checkout process. And so all of our libraries now have self-service checkout service. And we freed up that staff and reprogrammed it for the new North Branch Library. And I'm very proud of that. That's like building a fire station without adding any more firemen.
I want to talk more about the technology when we come back.
No question.
When we come back, we'll talk with Ed about the current state of our library system now that the work is all but done. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Peorian. I'm with Ed Sznaka, Director of the Peoria Public Library. Ed, you said before our break, you talked about the automation and the automatic checkout. You know the way it is with technology.
Yep.
What is new today could be obsolete by the time you take it out of the box and plug it in.
That is true.
Isn't that going to be a problem for libraries too?
Well, actually, I've been doing this for over 40 years, and I've watched how quickly libraries adapt. The best example I can give you is I'm old enough to tell you that I remember 45 and 33 1/3 records, which were in the library collections. And you know what happened to those. We ended up with 8 tracks at one time, and then cassettes and discs, so on. And the library had to change with that, and we have changed with that. However, the technology that's occurred in the last 10 years has been fundamental in terms of information. You know it. Your business uses the internet as a very important delivery mechanism of information. The library is moving in that direction in leaps and bounds, in fact, ahead of the citizens in some ways. Perhaps the best way I can demonstrate that to you is that since we reopened the branches, particularly the North Branch, we've been offering a lot more programming functions. And the program that we're offering that is getting standing room only attendance, and I mean just that, a room that can, fire marshal, keep your ears closed, a room that is scheduled to hold 100 people has 150 in it, is how to use your Nook and how to use your Kindle.
Really?
And here's one of the more interesting things. It is not the young people. It's senior citizens, and it's a mixture. They come, one, to learn about it, to decide what they want. Sometimes they buy it and haven't got a clue as to how to use it. And what we're doing is it's helping them learn how to do that. That is no different than what we used to do by teaching you how to use the Encyclopedia Britannica. The tool has changed, that's all. And that's the key to the success of the concept of the free public library, is that the tools have changed. The information and the commitment to delivery of information and the way we do so absolutely equally with all citizens, age, wealth, color, religion, all of those things, is a very, very important part of the value of the public library to a community.
But isn't keeping up with changes when it comes to technology more expensive than other things you've had to keep up with?
It depends upon which part of it that you look at. In point of fact, the purchase of terminals now is so cheap that compared to what it was 5 years ago, that compared to the labor that we used to put in by typing up 3x5 cards and having people spend a lot of time filing them into what you and I grew up as the card catalog, having that database automatically updated electronically through a national database, dumping the record in there, making it much more accessible to you, is actually cheaper and allows it. Reference books that you and I would have gone through in great depth, the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature, those big green books. Now you search under search terms and all that information is easily available. And the searching engines are getting simpler. But do we have to be smart? Yes. I mean, we have to be current, and we constantly have to be kind of one step ahead, because the public comes in and the latest thing they want. The latest issue for us is Blu-ray, for instance. You know, we have all these films in DVDs, and now we have a group of people who want everything in Blu-ray. Well, not everything is in Blu-ray, for instance, but we're developing a Blu-ray collection as part of the total collection, and we'll do it modestly and move, adjust accordingly. One interesting historical note is that we kept all of our 33 1/3 records, and they are worth something today and are actually in demand. I never thought I would have heard this from the hype that we got from the industry about how digital was so perfect. The real audiophiles are saying, no, 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 no. The records were much more accurate. And
really?
Yeah, I'm not an audiophile, so I don't know. I'm passing on, it may be urban legend, who knows?
We're going to take a break now, and when we come back, we'll ask Ed for his view about the future of libraries. But first, here is our literary and culinary guy, Kevin Kaiser, to tell us what's happening in his world.
Hey, it's your old buddy Kevin here. Welcome to My Little World. Today I'm hitting both the literary and culinary scenes. First off, another edition of You've Seen the Film, Now Read the Book. This week, a movie that completely upends the novel it was based on, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which was written by Ken Kesey in 1962. The 1975 film adaptation was made famous by Jack Nicholson's performance as McMurphy, and was the second film ever to win all 5 major Academy Award categories: Best Picture, Actor in Lead Role, Actress in Lead Role, Director, and Screenplay. The story is well known. McMurphy is arrested and sent to a mental institution for evaluation. While there, he befriends the other inmates and realizes the institution is primarily run on fear created by the unyielding Nurse Ratched. McMurphy takes on the nurse in a battle of wills that escalates to the point of assault, electroshock, lobotomy, and even worse for McMurphy. While the film was widely acclaimed, it differed drastically from the novel from the very get-go. How so? Well, in the novel, the story is narrated by Chief Bromden, the docile, half-Native American inmate believed to be deaf and mute, who in the movie plays a secondary role until the very end. In the end, Bromden, seeing the lobotomized McMurphy, smothers him before smashing a hydrotherapy console through a grated window and escaping. Kesey famously claimed to have never seen the movie, and one can't blame him. To completely change the narrator of the story had to be a hard decision, but at least the film stayed true to the storyline. So there you go, another edition of You've Seen the Film, Now Read the Book. Okay, now on to things of a culinary nature. I haven't talked about the culinary scene lately, but don't worry, it's still out there. In fact, we're shooting a brand new Kaiser party for at Keller's in downtown Peoria. On the 3rd Saturday of the month, the restaurant celebrates St. Practice Day, which is basically a dry run, so to speak, for St. Patrick's Day. A day full of Irish food, music, and dancing in preparation for the big day in March. Can't wait for that. And if you haven't seen our Kaiser Party of 4 previews, go to thepeorian.com and check out the first 2 at Sky Harbor and 309. Well, that's it for My Little World. Now we're returning to your little world, but first, the world of commercials.
We're back talking with Peoria's head librarian, Ed Sznaka. Ed, tell us your assessment, give us your assessment of the future of libraries, particularly in the long term.
Well, when I was in library school, even back then, they were talking about the obsolescence of the public library. Marshall McLuhan, famous media consultant, media is the message, television and videos, we're going to take everything over. The mix has changed. Very big mix has changed, obviously. But the function, as I described a little bit earlier, in terms of the tools, have changed, but the content and the breadth of the content is so much larger today than it ever was before. The amount of number of databases that we subscribe to, that you could never individually subscribe to, and the amount of information contained in those is quadrupling every single year. That means you have 4 times as much information in totality, potentially to reach. This isn't spectacular. It's just a product of the information industry, which now exists. Okay, the issue is, interestingly, that the internet, still in its, some say its infancy, some say it's middle-aged, or some in its teenage years, is considered to be kind of like the Wild West. Anything goes, but more and more of the material on the internet that is really valuable to people is on a fee basis.
Okay.
And so this is similar to when libraries provided books that citizens couldn't afford to buy, and so they collectively as a community decided, let's buy them for all of us and share them. We're doing exactly the same thing with the databases on behalf of the citizens. The best example I can give you is the Consumer Reports. You go into Consumer Reports, you want the 5 most efficient, fuel-efficient cars, and they give you that. And then you want to know the historical repair record. And if you know Consumer Report, they have these little columns with dots on them that tell you that, okay? When you go to that, it says, for that information, you have to be a subscriber at $12.95 a year, okay? Now, we subscribe to that database, and you can get that not only at the libraries, but now we are available at home from our webpage. You can get all that information. And so that function of the library is definitely still there. That function is not changing, and that's the key function. Will it look different? Will there be a day when everything is in one unit that Dr. Spock kind of like has? Perhaps. Certainly see it in things like cell phones or the little laptops or tablets that you're using here today. But the tools are not the most important part. It's the content and the veracity of the stuff that's on there. And that's one of the things libraries do, is they're kind of like, in a little way, like the editor in a newspaper. It's not the old Marion the librarian that we keep only the good books for people. But there are some people who tend to put things on the web that are not true. And so one of the things the library does is help people in that area. The medical and legal professions, for instance, have done that very strongly. The medical profession now has kind of like a good housekeeping seal of approval on that, and the legal profession is doing the same thing. Libraries do it in general just because we deal with it every single day and we know. We don't make a value judgment about it. We just simply will say to you, here are the 3 best, if you're looking for something on solar-powered automobiles, here are the 3 best I'm aware of, and pass that on to you. And that's a very big value to the citizen. Yeah. Saves time, energy, they get to where they want to, which is, bottom line, the real purpose of the public library is helping people to get to somewhere where they don't know how to get there, or in some cases don't even know what it is they're looking for.
All these databases that you subscribe to, one may be $12 a year, another $15 a year, but it all adds up. Is that a large portion of your budget?
Well, we're not buying the printed hardbound reference books any longer,
Okay.
so we've just simply adjusted and used that money for the database purposes. And the logic of that, we don't have the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature any longer because you don't need it. You wouldn't use it any longer. You'd put it into Google search engine and get what you wanted out of all of that. Some of the databases are very, they bring together hundreds of databases and sell us a product, and kind of like a broker. So it's not as complicated as one-on-one database.
Okay. Ed, thank you very much.
My
for your
pleasure,
time today.
my pleasure.
And thank you for joining us today. And remember, you can see today's show in its entirety on our website, thepeorian.com, as well as past episodes. And join us next Sunday at 8 a.m. here on WHOI for another episode of The Peorian. Have a good week.
Música